Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Crilley Mallis, joined with Laura Licursi, and we are super excited that you are here today as we finish up our 5-part series on delegating. One, two, three, four, 5-part series on delegating. So if you've missed any of the first 4, please go back and look at them. They're on both of our YouTube channels. They're on both of our Facebook pages where you may have found this. Like, they're all over the place. So be sure to go back and watch them. Today, we're going to finish that up, talking about how do you delegate, and also a couple of common myths that both of us hear all the time when it comes to delegating. But before that, who are we? I own Impactive Strategies, and I help business owners figure out how they can do more of what they love, less of all the other stuff, and have the room in the space to actually think throughout the day so that they can take strategic action.
And I am Laura Licursi, and I take what basically Lisa helps you do and package it up in our virtual assistant services. So I own Elite Virtual Assistants. We've been in business for 5 years, and I've been in the virtual assistant space for 23 years. So we help busy professionals, attorneys, and small business owners go from being overwhelmed and busy to being productive and structured with our services that we offer. And then I also help virtual assistants excel in the space by offering them. I have a whole website full of free resources and Facebook groups. So yeah, I just am all encompassed in the virtual assistant space. So as Lisa said, we have been talking to you. This is our 3rd part of the series on how to delegate. And I know personally from talking to so many people, over the last 5 years, that it is definitely not something that is easy for everybody to do. But as we know, it is the only thing that you can do that is going to help you grow both personally and professionally, because when you try to do everything yourself, you are very limited to the amount of time that you have, as Lisa says, 168 hours in a week. So you're never going to grow past that if you aren't able to delegate some of the tasks that you do not need to be doing. And so Lisa's going to lead us into our next part, on our part 3 on how to delegate.
So there's 8 steps on how to delegate, and we've covered the first 6 already, because delegating is a skill. It absolutely, positively is a skill. So when you are able to follow the steps, then the process becomes so much easier. So step 7 is to acknowledge and reward the person that you've delegated to once you get to the end of the project. Now, you are not acknowledging them and rewarding them because they did you a favor by completing the task. For many people, it's their job. You're paying them to do this. But there's that guilt that's associated with asking someone to do more work. That's not why you're rewarding them. You're rewarding them because it's just good sense to be a good human. They've done a job, they've done it well, reward them, acknowledge them. And if they haven't done it well, we're going to cover what happens there in step 8. But for right now, step 7, we're going to say reward and acknowledge them. And one tip that I will give you here is know how they like to be rewarded and acknowledged. And I'm not saying they deserve a trip to Hawaii. No, whatever it is. Some people like public acknowledgement. Some people hate public acknowledgement. And if you mix those up, everything you're trying to do to say, hey, great job, kudos to you, will fall flat because you've missed their praise style. So make sure you understand how they like to be rewarded and acknowledged. What tips do you have, Laura?
Yeah, that is really important, though. And I think it's something, too, that people really don't think about, because it's not a question that you're ever, really comfortable asking. It's like, okay, when you do this, how would you like me to acknowledge you and thank you? But it is important. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of times people don't necessarily do something or do a job even for the financial rewards. Obviously, we need financial rewards in order to live, but enjoying what they do and being recognized and, like you said, acknowledged for the work that they've done means more than, like, let's say, a pay raise or something like that. So I think that's, one of the things that's really important, that a lot of people think, well, I'm paying you and that's good enough. So it's really not. I mean, and again, like Lisa said, you need to know what your person wants and needs, and then be able to produce that. And it could just be something as simple as giving them more responsibilities. That could be what somebody's actually striving for. And, that's what their driver is, that they want to, prove themselves and be able to have more responsibility. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be anything like monetary or like a constant pat on the back, but acknowledgement and, maybe just giving them some more responsibilities or something.
Absolutely. And we're talking about more responsibilities. That leads right into step 8. Because step 8 is to actually evaluate the process. I believe one of the keys to being productive is to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. It seems pretty common sense.
That's key.
Yes. Oh, yes. We're so glad. I know all of you are thrilled you jumped in today to listen to this, to learn that nugget. But it truly is. If you could do more of what works and less of what doesn't, things get so much easier. And often what happens is we're so busy moving from one thing to the next that we don't stop and look back and evaluate what happened. And when you're done delegating a project, this is the perfect time to meet with someone and go over, what went well, what didn't go well. One of my clients found that the person she had delegated to hated the work, hated it all, and didn't want to say that she hated the work, and she did it, and she did a fine job. And then all of a sudden, my client happened to just say something along the lines of, great, I've got another project similar to this. Are you ready to get started? And she just saw the look on her face. Like,
the dreaded look.
Right? That was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And once they discovered that, they were able to say, okay, look, this is not something you love to do. We have other people on staff who we can try to do this work. What is stuff you'd like to do? And they were able to switch some projects around and find the right fit for her. And again, I'm not saying that everyone you delegate to has to love the project, but if you know up front the types of things they like, the types of things they don't like, that definitely helps make sure that your quality of work goes up. This is also a great time when you're evaluating the project to look at, what are the things that didn't work? As we alluded to in step 7, sometimes it doesn't work. Why? What happened? Were they missing information? Was there a step missing in the process? Like, this is also your opportunity to streamline processes. Once someone's gone through it once, they're in it, they see it, they can streamline it. So you don't skip this step. It's so easy to think, oh, okay, the project's done, I'm done. But no, there's this step of evaluating and looking at what works and what doesn't.
Right. And typically you're going to have to be, it depends on the process, but you're going to be repeating that over and over again. So that's a really good point, that you have to go back and evaluate it. And if the process was created by somebody else and this is somebody new taking it over, then give them the flexibility to create it their way so they understand it. And Lisa, you know what I'm talking about with this, because you've had that experience. Somebody created a process and everybody sees and takes in information differently. And sometimes it's at a really granular level, and sometimes it's at a higher level. And so it needs to be adjusted for that next person if they don't necessarily see things the way the other person did. So, being able to go back and review it together and say, okay, well, now that you're taking this over, how should we, how should we modify it, or, what have you? So going forward, it just makes more sense.
Absolutely, because we are doing that right now, as you know.
Yeah.
Of our processes. We're looking at, okay, we have them, they're great, and they can always be improved upon. I think sometimes people will think that the process is a one and done, and it's not. It's a living, breathing document. Keep it moving. One of the pieces that's or one of the goals, I would say, of going through these 8 steps is to make it easier on the person you're delegating to and the person who is delegating. Like, it's all of that. And I think a secondary goal there is to try to continue to increase the level of delegation. So maybe they started down at level 1 and you're trying to get them to level 2. And then you want to try to see if they can get to level 3. And if you're unfamiliar with the 6 levels of delegation, we covered this in one of our previous episodes. And the evaluation process is exactly the place where you can start to figure that out. How much more, or actually how much less structure can you give them that they can be successful? Now, we have a couple myths that we would like to bust.
This is the fun part.
I feel like between the two of us, Laura, we probably have heard them all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we've heard them all. So the first one that I want to start, that we're going to start with today, is I'm the only one that knows how to do this, which is closely related to, by the time I teach someone to do this, I could probably do it quicker myself. And so here's what I say to clients. And when I say this, some of you are going to say, oh my God, I can never be your client. And you may absolutely be right. It's good that we know this now. But I will say to clients, when they say, I'm the only one that knows how to do this, I will say, did you come out of the womb knowing how to do this? And I will tell you, I have yet to have someone say to me, yes. So it isn't that you're the only one that knows how to do it. It's that you're the only one that currently has the knowledge, and you have yet taken the time to figure out how to impart that knowledge into someone else's brain, which is why it's so closely related to, by the time I teach someone, I could just do it myself. So you weren't born with this. Laura, what do you think?
Well, one of the rules, and we've talked about this before too, is just not expecting that 100% perfection, especially right out of the gate. I can't tell you how many times clients come to us and they say, I want a VA who is going to read my mind. Well, good luck, because I will never guarantee that that's going to happen. And it's not that it can't, because usually once you start working with somebody and you start learning their patterns and their personalities, yes, it's really easy to start, working together like a well-oiled machine. But, you have to go in understanding that it takes a while for that to, it typically doesn't just happen, at that very first interaction. So, as long as it's being done at like 80, 90%, and the outcome is exactly what you wanted, just don't go looking for that perfection, because nobody is going to be able to live up to that, and everybody's going to be disappointed. So just being realistic about like what your expectations are, and kind of knowing what to expect, going into it, and kind of, judging, well, what is actually good enough? What is going to be good enough for me? I still want to maintain this professional image. You're going to have those certain boundaries that they need to stay within, but don't expect it to be exactly the way that you would want it done.
Exactly. Like sometimes 80% is good enough. And then there are times where 100%, there's nothing less than 100% is okay. And being able to know the difference and know where that is,
Mm-hmm.
which leads into that idea of, by the time I teach someone, that I could have done it myself. Well, of course you could have the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But not every time. And the challenge comes in you thinking through, how do you teach it? Because again, you learned it yourself. How do you help someone else learn it, but condense the time frame through whatever that may be, screen share, checklist, whatever that process may be. But you are not the keeper of all the knowledge. Because if you are the keeper of all the knowledge, then we come into the next myth, which is, I can't get any work done in my office because everyone keeps asking me questions. I have to wait for people to go home before I can do my own work. So, and this is probably after a couple of weeks where people have tried to delegate. This is what clients come back to me and say, before I delegated, no one was asking me questions. I should just go back to doing everything myself. Here's the deal. And again, you may hear this and think, I could never be your client. Because if people are asking you questions, it means you haven't done a good enough job explaining what you need done.
Yep.
It's not on them. Again, like Laura said, they can't read your mind. You need to take the time to think and plan, give them enough information that they can do their job. So if you're all the way down on level 1, that enough information so they can do their job is a step-by-step process to follow.
Mm-hmm.
If you're all the way out on level 6, that enough information so they can do their job is saying, here are the parameters of what I want the outcome to look like. Have at it. And then everything in between. So what do you think when people say, I can't get anything done because people keep asking me questions?
Yeah, it is. It's just setting up those like expectations and boundaries and letting them know. The thing is, you've got to put that time in up front. You've got to put that time in up front. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And I see like what happens with us is people will come in and just want to offload 10 tasks all at one time, and they expect no questions to be asked. Even if you hand over an SOP, or you hand over your processes, there's still going to be initial questions. So just if this is your first time delegating, you've got to go into it understanding that it's going to take time, right? Like it took time for us to teach our kids to tie their own shoes so that we stopped tying their shoes every time we tried to walk out the door, or the dreaded potty training or whatever it is, right? But it's to free up time. So no matter what that looks like to you, you've got to be willing to put the effort in and that time in the beginning so that you can have that, that freedom and flexibility at the end.
Right. And when we talk about making sure that you're freeing up time and they are asking questions and all these things, keep a FAQ sheet. Because here's the deal. That task that you've just delegated to someone who has a bunch of questions, if they can keep track of those questions, then the next time someone else does that same task, those questions are right there for them to reference. And you can keep uploading. You can keep updating that. Again, it's not you. It's the person doing the work.
Right. Right.
All right. So now for, I think, what is Laura and my favorite part, success stories. So Laura, do you have a success story for us?
Yeah, well, it's funny because over the last week, I've noticed that some people are starting to take the time now to finally get those passion projects of theirs off the ground, because typically we haven't, you don't have time to do that. It doesn't matter if you're just a full-time employee somewhere or you've got your own business, you're busy, and then you come home and you're busy. Well, everybody's home. So it's, you've cut down so much on spreading yourself really too thin that people are realizing, wow, I actually have time to dedicate to this now. And so that's what we've been seeing is a little bit more of that. And then actually finding new areas that they can delegate, because like we just talked about before, they really didn't have the time to think about how to even delegate certain other areas. And now they've got that time and they know that they can invest the time to really teach somebody. So those are really the two new things that have crept up just in the last week since we talked last Wednesday.
Ooh, I love those. Of course, I'm excited about they now have time to think to delegate. Look,
yeah.
That, not gonna
But it
lie.
does take time, right?
That makes me happy. So here's an interesting one, I think. One of my clients was struggling sleeping. And so she said in one of our sessions, I just can't sleep. Now, I am not someone who specializes in sleep. And I was like, oh, okay, tell me more. Because I was like, I don't know why she's telling me this, but let's dig in a little bit deeper. And what we came to realize was that when she was really great about setting her boundaries when she was at work. She'd go to her office, she'd do her work, she'd come home, and there was a separation between work and home. And now that she's home, there really is no end time to her day. And I am okay with I think the idea of work-life balance is not exactly the way that we should talk about it, because balance implies even and equal, and that's not really realistic. And so I will often say work-life integration, but I don't mean your work takes over your home. And that's how you've integrated it. And so she's recognized that it just seeps in all the time and she never feels like she's done working. Mm-hmm. And then she's not sleeping and it just kind of steamrolls. And so that, like when we talk about unintended consequences, like 6 weeks ago, we would not have thought that that would have been something that would have come up. That someone who typically has strong boundaries would be not sleeping well because everything's kind of smushed together. And so my piece here is just watch out for that for yourselves. And so the success part of that story is she set herself office hours and she closed the door and does not go back in until the next day. Phone on airplane mode, like the whole bit. She's pretending like she's at work. She even will most of the time walk around the house as if she's left her work and then come back in to home to help make that separation.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to do little things like that, little tweaks. So mentally you get into that right space, and I think a lot of times people don't think about it, or they might think it sounds silly, but you really need to have that separation. I mean, you and I know as business owners, I don't think we have it, period. But it is important, like, especially if it's something that you're not used to.
Right. Absolutely. So we are super excited that you have joined us. For more information on how to delegate and how to do it well, there's scrolling across the bottom, there's a bit.ly link that you can go to grab your own report that lists what to delegate, how, who, the whole bit. So make sure that you grab that. Next week, Laura and I are off because we
vacation time.
What is that? Porta Backyarda.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to hang out in the back. But I will let you in on a secret. Laura and I are going to meet next week to talk about what else we want to share with you. So we're taking the week off. You can help us by letting us know what you'd like to learn from us. So make sure you post in the comments. And see you in 2 weeks. And have a safe and productive day.
Take care.